One of the things that I think very few people can criticize about Assassin's Creed is how well the historical landmarks and places that we explore have been basically recreated. Ubisoft has an unnatural, almost suspiciously good ability to recreate historical locations as if they had a time machine, where they could actually explore the cities as they were back in the time they're depicted. Now, I like how much attention this gets and I like how much praise this gets, but I do believe that there are a lot of beautiful places that make me feel a lot and make me kind of soak in the atmosphere and think and ponder and immerse myself as an assassin in this world that often don't get discussed because they tend to be things that you overlook or don't really pay attention to because they're not the famous landmarks like the pyramids or the Notre Dame. So what I wanted to do today was basically pick 3 of my favorite locations across Assassin's Creed games. One's going to be in AC1, one's going to be in Unity, and another one's going to be in Origins. And I'm just going to basically boot up my game and run around and explain why I love these locations, what they make me feel, what they make me think, and just give them a little bit of attention because I don't think enough people do. So starting off here, we're in Assassin's Creed 1, and I'm going to show you the back gardens of Masyaf Castle. You only have to visit this garden once or twice in the game. Once at the beginning when you're Desmond and you're having like a fever dream, and twice when you're fighting Al-Mualim. And when you're fighting Al-Mualim, you can't see what you're seeing here now, which is these women that are just standing around weirdly while petals flow in the air. The first thing that you notice is that the vibes are completely unprecedented. Like, this is such an atmospheric, eerie, creepy location that kind of serves to prove that Assassin's Creed 1 from a gameplay perspective is very much an open world only in a technical sense. What I mean by this is that even though you can go anywhere in the world, there's no real reason to unless there's a mission or a prompt or something to interact with during the story. Once you've done the story things, or before you're doing the story things, there's no real reason to explore these places, mechanically speaking. There's no gameplay scenarios, there's nothing to discover apart from like a flag, and it leaves you wondering, why is this here? And why are these women here? And why is this even part of the game and there's nothing to do with anything apart from a boss battle that you could have placed anywhere else? The first thing that I feel is eeriness, because one thing that I appreciate about Assassin's Creed 1 is that it sticks very closely to the real history. And it doesn't romanticize the idea of being an assassin. When I walk around this garden, I feel like it's a place where assassins would come to think and feel peaceful. The mountains in the background, I remember playing as a kid for the first time, and I just thought to myself, I wish I could magically extend the code in this game to be able to explore those mountains. I was so immersed by the idea of something in the distance that I couldn't access, and even though my rational brain knew that it's because it didn't exist, the code wasn't made for it, these were just like facades, I just wanted to access them and I wanted to peer over. The same thing happened when I walked as Desmond and looked outside the window from Vidic's office. And that sense of wonder and curiosity at what lies below, at the newness of this garden and how disjointed it feels from the rest of the game, is something that I got completely obsessed with. The second reason why is because going back to it as an Assassin's Creed fan years later, it kind of breaks your heart to know that this is actually the place where Altair's wife dies. Maria is stabbed in this patch of grass over here, and to go there in AC1 and know how Darby McDevitt basically implemented it into the story makes it so much better to revisit AC1 knowing what would happen years later when Altair is an old man. But that pales in comparison to the real reason why I love this garden. And the reason why is because Assassin's Creed 1, as I said, sticks very closely to the real history. And the Assassin's Creed, the assassins, are based off of a historical group called the Hashashins, which comes from the word hash smokers, because these were a group of extremists or, freedom fighters that were branded by their enemies as hash smokers, as drug takers. And it was rumored that the leader of the Hashashins would essentially drug the Order's members to brainwash them into compliance and to become loyal to the Creed. This links so beautifully narratively to the rest of Assassin's Creed. Like, what would happen essentially is that you wake them up in the garden surrounded by beautiful women, because that was a big part of the Islamic faith, and you use that to convince them that he, the leader, had the power to send them and bring them back from heaven. This is basically alluded to when Al-Mualim punishes Altair for the messed up mission that he has at the beginning of the game. But it's also alluded to at the beginning of the game with Desmond, when Altair is running around surrounded by women, and you're kind of like in this catatonic or kind of like trippy state. What all this alludes to, basically, is that Al-Mualim in the game used these women as a primordial way of mind controlling the assassins. You learn that Al-Mualim in the end wanted to control assassins and used the apple for it. And just like the Templars who tried methods distinct to the apple when they didn't have the apple, Al-Mualim probably brainwash the assassins through using these women. And even if he didn't in the lore, the illusion of it through having these women in this beautiful garden to recreate kind of like heaven and create the sense that Al-Mualim has the power of sending his subjects to heaven and back is a really cool little fact about Assassin's Creed 1 that I am completely in love with. So yeah, this is just a great, neat little place that adds a layer of creepiness and realism to Assassin's Creed that I deeply, deeply value. And it just makes me feel sad in a very good way. It makes me feel sad because I know that Altair loses his wife, the idea of him being brainwashed by Al-Mualim, and just the idea of not being able to explore, not being able to leave these walls. And yeah, it's just cool. Okay, so the second one we're going to explore here is the cathedral in Franciad. For those who don't know, Franciad is the city that you explore in Assassin's Creed Unity's DLC, which, by the way, is completely free to play, and I completely recommend you play it. I think it's one of the best DLCs in the franchise. It completely understands what you would want from a DLC, and kind of fixes a lot of the issues that the base game has, narratively speaking. And this cathedral, to me, is kind of like the sick cousin of the Notre Dame Cathedral, the kind of like twisted sister. I think it has complete place in Assassin's Creed, especially in Franciad, where Arno goes when he's a much more sour and serious man, when he's been disillusioned by the loss of Elise and feeling like everything he did over the last few years was in vain. The city, Franciad, is completely run down, plague-ridden, filled with smog, and way too many guards that are all treating you like you're basically the biggest threat in the world. Like, they all want to kill you. The police and the extremists have allied up, and it's a really difficult place to play gameplay-wise compared to the main game. And I think this is all reflected by the shattered beauty that you see in this cathedral. The way that the light sinks and filters into the space, the way that the fog clings onto the floor, refusing to evaporate, the way that Arno slowly walks through these holes, it just makes you want to explore every single meter of this cathedral. And I know that Notre Dame is technically more impressive, and I know that they spent more time on it, but there's something about the idea of a shattered, run-down, abandoned cathedral in an old town filled with miserable people and horrible guards, and you're just this exploring assassin jaded by life who's wandering these walls like a ghost. It's just irresistible to me from a lore perspective, from an immersion perspective. There's so much to love, not even the cathedral itself, but the cemetery that surrounds it, the incomplete rooftop, the views that you see when you reach the top. I mean, just look at me walking around here in the cemetery. Don't tell me that this isn't just the biggest vibe in the world. I just can't help but admire it. I think the fog and the light is some of the best work that Ubisoft has ever done in terms of set dressing. Honestly, this whole open world, I don't know how Ubisoft did it in 2014. It's insane. And as you go up and you explore the rooftops, the immersion and the wow factor just keeps on increasing. As you sneak yourself through these little columns and explore the roof and the windows and peer into the cathedral from a bird's eye view, doesn't it just make you want to be an assassin? Like, fill that ground, fill these walls with guards, place me atop this cathedral as soon as you can, and let me put my hood on and stalk them from above. The incomplete rooftops, the beautiful facade that isn't quite finished yet, that shows the broken state of Paris, of Francia, and of Arno's own psyche. This is exactly what I would want from a DLC, and I'm so glad this cathedral exists, and I just urge more of you to just stroll around it and explore it. Because for me, a DLC, especially in a game set in revolutionary France, requires a dark, somber twist. And a game that has such a powerful lighting engine, a game that has such beautiful graphics, and amazing atmosphere through everything from the customization to the music to the sound design, everything just serves this brutally dark and eerie fantasy that you cannot escape. I mean, yeah, just look at this. Like, as Arno peers and turns and looks at all these views, let me just get to the top for a second. How can you not feel awe and sadness and happiness at the same time? This kind of like bittersweet feeling of how beautiful this place is. I feel nostalgic for this place for some reason, even though I've never lived through this time, and I played this game when I was 14 years old, but I don't feel that kind of nostalgic of me being a child. I feel nostalgic for Arno, for the life he had before he lost everything. This to me represents the state of his mind. to me, Franciad is essentially a reflection of Arno's state of mind at this point in the story. And the cathedral is the beating heart of it. So that's another location that I just absolutely adore, and I urge more of you to just explore it. And finally, we have Assassin's Creed Origins. Now, you're going to have to forgive me because I'm going to nerd out on this one quite a lot. Assassin's Creed Origins has some insane places. Alexandria, Memphis, the pyramids in Giza, Cyrene as well. Insanely well recreated places, and a lot of places that have been showcased, and rightfully so, by many players and reviewers and YouTubers and Redditors, and everyone online has gushed and gushed about ancient Egypt. One place that I don't see a lot of people complimenting or fangirling about is Alexander the Great's tomb. Now, I have to admit that I'm very biased because I just finished reading a biography on Alexander the Great, and I'm currently just obsessed with the man and consuming all the media I can on him. But I still got excited when I first played this game and visited his tomb. And I'm going to explain why. First, on just a vibe analysis of why I like this tomb and how cool it is to be experiencing such an important part of history. Right now, you can't really access his tomb if it even is there. But there's a lot of interesting history that we can explore because Ubisoft has decided to recreate these places. So you walk through this amazing hall that just speaks to the grandeur of the man himself, with all these Greek statues staring down on you, and you feel so insignificant and small next to what is essentially the personal guard of the late Alexander the Great. And you walk up and you see his tomb, and covered in a sarcophagus. The reason why is because when he died in Persia, the men that he was served by, his brothers, his close guard, all competed for little parts of the empire and all wanted to take his body to different parts. And the one that took him to Egypt was actually Ptolemy, which, you fight one of his ancestors in Assassin's Creed Origins. The main villain is Ptolemy before Julius Caesar kind of takes over. And Ptolemy essentially took him to Egypt and mummified him and left him here. So you can see Alexander the Great. This is just the coolest thing ever. You can just see Alexander the Great buried here, understanding the history behind it and why he ended up in Alexandria, which was the first of many cities that he named after himself. And while I light these candles with my bow for some reason, let me just explain why I love the idea of Alexander the Great having the Staff of Eden and the Apple of Eden. One thing that Vidic said in Assassin's Creed 1, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember the quote perfectly, is that human beings didn't invent anything. They merely discovered it, alluding to the idea that the Isu left these instruments, these artifacts of Eden and this knowledge for us to find. Not intentionally, of course, but they still left it for us to find. And that many great leaders in history, the way that they kind of rallied humans to their cause was by using the pieces of Eden in their favor. Now, let me just quickly read some of this history. It says, Alexander is born as the child of the god Zeus Ammon and his mother Olympias. This is cool because Olympias always professed that Alexander the Great was the son of Zeus, not the son of Philip of Macedon, and it's suspected by some people that she actually cheated with a priest from Egypt, which is cool. Aristotle educates Alexander, a natural leader and young heir. So yeah, Alexander the Great was tutored by Aristotle because Aristotle knew Philip of Macedon, his father, and he was kind of on the run when Philip was like, hey, come teach my son and you can stay in my court, because Aristotle had recently escaped a part of Greece that was under a rebellion, and he was afraid of being killed. What do we have here? Alexander the Great crowns Ptolemy Lagos as his successor. So this isn't actually true. This is what Ptolemy, when he moved to Egypt and made that his kingdom, created to basically say that Alexander crowned him successor. But Alexander actually said famously that the empire should go to the strongest when he was asked who it should go to. Alexander the Great conquers the known world. So yeah, at the time, Alexander the Great was the most successful conqueror of all time, and he managed to expand the Greek Empire and the Macedonian Empire to their likes that no one had ever really seen before, or really since, apart from, people like Napoleon and other great rulers like Caesar. But yeah, just going back to the other one, it's interesting how it's not explained to you in this game that picture you see of Alexander naming Ptolemy a successor isn't actually historically accurate. As in, Alexander never did that, but Ptolemy probably wrote that down to make his succession and his ascension in the empire in Egypt much more official. And it's just stuff like that I'm just so obsessed with, the attention to detail that Ubisoft has for this kind of stuff. But as I was saying before I kind of started reading the quotes, the idea of Alexander the Great reaching this power, this success, this leadership through obviously his charisma and wit and grandeur, but also through the Pieces of Eden, falls in line so beautifully with the beginning of Assassin's Creed that it makes me feel like the AC Origins developers understood Assassin's Creed, because Vidic in AC1 explains, how these Pieces of Eden have impacted history, like with Jesus and other historical figures. And in AC2, a lot of the puzzles that you have to solve kind of reflect how Napoleon and Hitler and other people used the Apple of Eden as well as other artifacts to control the people that they were leading and to win these victories that they won. So to carry that on with Alexander the Great was just a very beautiful and nice opportunity that they took and they did really well with. That's basically the third weird and wonderful location that I want to show. It's just an absolutely beautiful area that Bayek explores, and I kind of wanted to share it with you guys because I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it. Obviously, I am biased because I'm obsessed with Alexander the Great, but it's still a very cool and awe-inspiring thing that fits very well with the AC lore that I've come to respect as kind of like the main canon for me, and obviously everyone has their own opinions. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that. If you're interested in me exploring more locations, let me know. But one thing that I did explore was what settings I would like Assassin's Creed to be set in the future that I think would service this franchise in a positive way. So if you want to watch that video about my top 3 AC settings, you can watch this video now.